Yeah, welcome Matt for the one of the first episodes of the Streamlit Cookbook series. Let's kick things off by introducing yourself, please, Matt.
Well, thanks. No, it's great to be here. Happy to be collaborating with Streamlit. So my name is Matt. I work in developer relations at Replit. I'm a former data analyst, former data engineer, which is how I'm familiar with Streamlit. But now I work in developer relations, so helping build the platform and share it with others. Tell everybody about how they can be successful using Replit.
Right. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah. What is Replit? Could you maybe give us a little bit of a bird's eye view of that?
Absolutely. So Replit's an online development environment where you can write, create, and build applications and then deploy them to the internet. So really, it's a framework for writing code, and it abstracts away a lot of the configuration that makes writing code hard on your local machine. Maybe for some folks that aren't professional software developers, or that don't want to deal with virtual environments, all of the configuration that comes with doing something like installing Python. So for an example, if you wanted to open up a REPL, it's kind of like a real-time coding environment. We're going to walk through an example today. We have multiplayer so that you can collaborate as if you were editing a Google Doc or editing a document in Notion. It's the same experience, but with writing code. And that all happens inside the browser. So what that means is that it can run on any machine, on any device, even your phone. And those environments are identical across machines. And because that's happening in the cloud, your development environment is effectively the environment that you deploy. I think this will make a bit more sense when we walk through it, but think about it kind of like a code editor, where all of the code and the environment is like all of the building is happening inside a container if you're more technical, or if you're less technical, it's effectively isolated, which makes building, installing things, and deploying them a lot easier. But in practice, that means that it's really simple to build apps and deploy them, which we'll talk about a bit today.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds very exciting, and I really like the concept of like the multiplayer kind of makes coding a lot funner.
It does, yeah, it does.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so are you ready for the demo?
Yeah, for sure. So today I'm going to show you something that I built in Replit a couple days ago. We're using Streamlit, obviously, but then we're going to talk a bit about the Replit specific functionality that made it simple to build and how we were able to deploy that. So I'll share my screen here, and I'll just show you the app. So there are a lot of data folks at Streamlit, right? A lot of data scientists, data analysts, data engineers. So I built a pretty simple A/B testing tool app here, and I'll zoom in on this a little bit. But what we have on the front page is a sample size calculator. So if you have, say, a conversion rate, you want to manipulate that. You want to have a significance level, maybe that you're targeting, as well as a minimum detectable effect or a statistical power metric that you're looking for. We can calculate the sample size required for an A/B test that you're going to run, and then you get a nice little graph on a log scale that shows you exactly how many users per variant you would need to run a good A/B test. And then you can switch this over from relative to absolute for the effect. And then there's also a results analyzer. Pretty simple, very straightforward, where you can adjust the samples for two groups, a confidence level, and then get the conversion rates as well as error bars and an estimated impact. Again, you can toggle that between relative and absolute. So this is an example of something that a lot of people would find handy in their day-to-day, maybe use. Maybe you're building an internal tool or a tool for your team, or you want to build this and share it with other analysts, other data scientists. And so today I'm going to show you Replit. I'm going to show you how we built this in Replit, and the code's also open source. So you can take this, you can deploy it to your team immediately if you wanted to. But yeah, that's a little bit about what I built. We can jump into the code now. So I'll switch my screen here, and we're going to head to Replit. So this is the editor, and this is kind of what I was talking about when I said it's, when I explained what Replit is. So we'll close out some of these tabs here, make things really basic. This is probably familiar if you've developed in an editor before. The difference is, though, if I look at like a shell, right? We'll clear this out. We have our own file system. Right. So this is, again, running on a virtual machine. It's, Ubuntu. So anything that you can do on a Linux machine, you can do here. I just really want to make that clear. And then this REPL is configured to run Streamlit run when I click that run button. And so what's going to happen if I run this is we're going to get a preview of our application in localhost, and that's just running the main file. So this is really similar to what you'd do if you're developing locally, right? But I want to just make it very apparent that this is actually happening in the browser. And so instead of getting a development URL that's localhost some port, right, our development URL is actually live on the web. So if I open this, if I click on that link, it's going to open this page in a new browser. But the cool thing is, right, this is also multiplayer. So, if I sent this to you, Chanin, or if I opened this on my phone, I would be able to see the page as well. So in that sense, it's really great for developing and iterating. I've done it a few times where I'll be building an app on my desktop and then open this URL on my phone, and I'm able to actually see a preview of the application, which you wouldn't be able to do if you're just running something on localhost, right? So this is our basic app. And I'll obviously feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions or you have any comments. But things are very similar to what we would be doing if we were building locally here. So I'll just walk through how it works. Now, this is about 250 lines of Python. So it's not terribly complex. I'm actually going to collapse these just to make the structure a bit easier. What I'm doing basically is defining a few functions. So calculating sample size, plotting the sample curve, analyzing the results, and then we're building sort of the architecture of this page. And so if I switch back over to the app really quickly, right, we have a header up top, which is the same across the application. And then we have two kind of mini apps within our page. We have the sample size calculator and the results analyzer. And then I added this measurement type, which allows us to toggle between relative results, right? So relative impact of 5% from if you went, if you had 100 original conversions, say, that would be 105, right? But an absolute, actually, they would be the same in that instance. But relative versus absolute is just the difference in the way that you're calculating the conversion, right? And then within our mini apps, we have two tabs. So if we're thinking about like the architecture of the Streamlit app, that's going to be reflected in our code. So I'll head on over to the code here, and you can see we're looking at tab 1 and tab 2. And then the two columns are just for the title and then that little toggle button, which I showed. And I guess it'd probably be easier actually if I showed you in the web view rather than switching over. So the panes in Replit are completely floating. So like you can drag and drop them wherever you need to have things. So I'm going to put main over here. We'll have the web view over here. So we can kind of see, right? We're defining tab 1, which is going to be the sample size calculator, and that's 40 lines. We're defining two columns where we're then going to put these sliders to kind of improve the UI. And from there, we're going to build out those functions. So I'll move this over. And you can see in the first column, we're defining our sliders, moving on to the actual results. So a lot of this is pretty basic. If you're thinking about, if you have a knowledge of like Streamlit's components, which are really helpful, if you're thinking about UI, right? We're using Streamlit's components like toggles, like sliders, to provide the inputs for functions that are then going to return our graph and some of the other more complex things that we're doing here. And so, I don't think it's super valuable to walk through this like line by line, but what I did use for this app was Altair, which, provides a lot of the charting. It's a really clean charting library. And then the rest of it was just basically some simple statistics and mathematics for calculating these curves. A little bit of AI to help me write the code, right? But obviously checking that on my own. If we head on over to the second tab, it's pretty similar to what's going on in the first, where we're taking inputs with Streamlit components. So we're looking at just basically an input with a plus and minus there, another slider, and then we're returning an Altair chart that's interactive and has some error bars. And that'll be reflected in the code, where you can see we're calculating those conversion rates with that analyze results function, and then putting things in a few data frames and returning those Altair charts. So yeah, at the end of the day, it's pretty simple. We added this little data frame down here with the tabularized results, and it is really straightforward. Now, the other thing that I do want to point out is that this app is deployed. So the first overview that I showed you is actually live on the internet, and that's sort of one of the benefits of Replit, is that we make deploying these kinds of apps really simple. And so in addition to being able to write this code, and also we have AI functionality embedded. So if I hit Command I could enter a prompt to modify the selection with some of the latest models there. We also have an AI chat with AI functionality. So if I head on over to the AI pane, we have context-aware AI that I could ask, like what's going on in main.py. And through RAG, we're embedding the contents of the REPL, and then layering on top some pretty advanced models that are able to walk through this app basically like I just did. So if you're somebody that likes to interact with AI and toggle between Claude or GPT 4.0 when you code, that's all available in Replit in the AI pane, and you can see very similar chat interface where you have chats, you can talk to them, and you can do that when you're editing the files as well. I use this for writing READMEs, for building apps, and for iterating quite a bit. So in terms of development, that's super useful. But back to sort of the deployments piece, right? Well, actually, I'll remove this deployment since this isn't shared a ton on the web just yet. But if I shut this down and actually delete the deployment, you'll see just how simple it is. And so we have 4 different types of deployments. The important thing to remember is that deployments are really a snapshot of your REPL. So in this case, if this app runs, right, you can see, we have it running in the web view pane. If it runs, you know that it deploys. And that's kind of the beauty of Replit, is that we're taking this isolated environment, this container, and then we're putting it live on the web, with some modifications. But you could almost think about it, if you're more technical, like deploying a Docker container, but with a UI and a much simpler, faster interface, because you don't have to rebuild the container. We have 4 different types of deployments. These are hung up on loading a little bit here. I'll close this out. I might have to refresh the REPL here. Sweet. So we have 4 different types of deployments for front-end apps like Streamlit. Autoscale is the way to go. We can talk about the others we have some documentations on we have some docs on those, and I'll also share some other resources on getting started there. But really the beauty in Replit deployments is how simple it is. So we'll suggest a machine power and a maximum number of machines. In auto-scaling deployments, the more people visit your app, the more we horizontally scale, which just means basically give more machines to the back end of the application to handle that traffic. But for something that's simple like this application, it won't need that much power. Basically, all you have to do is provide a domain. So we'll call this A/B testing, a run command, and then you can even add deployment secrets. So one of the great things about Replit is that if I wanted to define secrets in my code, we have an interface for doing that. So say I wanted to add something like Matt's secret, and then it has a value. Adding that secret is going to make it available in the code through an environment variable. So you don't need to worry about .env files, syncing things when you're building. It takes the headache out of that quite a bit. But in terms of deploying, basically all I need to do is define a domain, define a run command, Streamlit run main, and then click deploy. And this will take a couple minutes, but what we're doing is taking this environment that we've been building on that's in the browser and moving it to the cloud. And so in 2 or 3 minutes, this app will be available at that address that I specified. And that's really the exciting thing about Replit. That's the sort of magic, so to speak, is that even if you don't know a ton about infrastructure or deployment, but you know how to build Streamlit apps, you know how to write Python, you can take that, make it live on the internet, and share really powerful tools with your team. So yeah, that's an overview of the app. as I discussed, right, like if you wanted to invite users for multiplayer, you could create a join link, share this link with anybody else on Replit, and they're going to come in and there'll be a real-time collaboration experience. Yeah, and our goal, right, is to level up really anybody that wants to write code, that wants to build applications, that wants to improve the way that they do things or create new things for people to use, right? With Replit, we think everyone is a software developer, and we're giving people the tools to do just that. So that's been a high-level overview. Any questions? How are you feeling about this?
Yeah, feeling good. Yeah, it looks very intuitive, and everything is very streamlined. I have a quick question about like the prerequisite libraries. Could you maybe tell us a little bit like what if we want to install other libraries? How could we do that?
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. So by default in these projects, we often use Poetry because it's really simple and it really works well with Replit. So you could also use pip. Poetry is not like a requirement, but if I head into this PyProject file, you see that we have our Python dependency defined. We have Altair defined, NumPy, Pandas, SciPy, Streamlit, etc. Adding other libraries, is just like a Poetry add. So if you ever used Poetry before, to add a library, you'd basically go like Poetry, add polars, and then Poetry is going to do all like the version control and like locking, install the app and write it to the Poetry lock file, which is what powers those applications. And maybe another thing to go over here is that on the back end, we handle a lot of the language installation through this .replit file. So this is where we define, when you click the run button, this guy up here, what's going on. So Streamlit run main, but then also like the deployment command. So Streamlit run main again. As well as like the language and the modules. The modules are just effectively like little language packages. So this is actually pretty cool. It's a good chance to show you something pretty neat about how Replit works. And so that's if I go over here and type Python. I think it's -v, right? I'll get my Python version. If I change this to 3.12, hit save, I'll clear this out. I'll do the same thing. One more time. There you go, 3.12. So if you've ever upgraded Python on your machine or tried to manage virtual environments, I can guarantee you it wasn't that fast, and you probably ran into some headaches. But really updating or changing the versions of even entire languages that you want to use is as simple as typing Python or changing one line in our .replit file. The same goes for, right, I want to emphasize this is not a Python-specific tool. If you just typed in Node, Replit's going to recognize that. It's going to install Node.js, and then you could do like a Node. Whoop. Same thing. Whoop. I actually don't know how to get Node versions. Well, there you go. All right, Control-C. Just like that, you can install Node. You can switch between versions. So very long answer, but you can manage packages using Poetry here. And then you'll see, actually, I installed Python 3.12. So I'd need to change Poetry to be 3.11. And then I could do a Poetry lock, and it'll recognize the updated versions. Whoops. Need to be more specific about what versions I'm using here. So we would say in Poetry speak, we're going to say the version has to be greater than or equal to 3.12. And then the lock should work, and it'll resolve those dependencies and install all the packages we need. And there you go.
Nice. And would the environment need to be rebooted in order for the app to update?
No, I mean, so if I the correct version's installed, all the packages are installed. If I just run the app here, it's going to fire everything up. Really, the great piece is that we handle that rebooting in the back end through our own sort of package management. And you can see on the first run, it's actually performing those installs. So Replit will take care of that, and we'll make sure everything's working smoothly.
Cool, nice. Does the app ever go to sleep if there's inactivity?
Yeah, so that's actually a good question. The development version here, the one we're running, will stop just because it's a development version, right? And it's similarly, if you're developing on your local machine, you wouldn't really want localhost running all the time. Obviously, we just deployed this, so if I click on the deployments pane, the app is now live at this address. Auto scale deployments actually do scale down. So you don't have to, it wouldn't be like a complete cold start, but if no one's visiting your app, this type of deployment will effectively scale to 0 so that you're not being billed until somebody visits the page. And then we'll start spinning up containers in the background. So the deployment environment, yes, it does stop as you might expect. And then even the deployment environment, you can configure it essentially to save money by not being active when no one's using it. And that's what our auto scale deployments do.
Wow, that's pretty useful. And is there like kind of like a hard limit that we could set, like if it exceeds any compute hours, or to kind of stop or to prevent, overusage?
For sure. I don't think we have like a hard compute limit stop, but you can edit the like actual machine power to limit usage. So we could do like 1 CPU, 1 gig of RAM. You could limit the actual number of machines that are running to limit the compute usage. And then we do provide logs and analytics as well to measure the number of requests. So if you saw traffic really picking up, you could start to like make some changes. We also have like some pretty hard resources if we'd been using the application on like hard analytics rather on CPU utilization, on memory utilization, and some pretty granular settings that you can configure to make sure that you're on top of, how much usage your app is consuming.
Right. Yeah. Do you guys have kind of like documentation on building with Replit?
Yeah, we do. So if you head over to docs.replit.com, I'll go there right now. We have, quick starts, getting started, secrets, deployments, basically anything that you can think of. The other two sites that I'll plug are replit.com/guides. And that is a series of guides on how you can get started building. So we have a Streamlit chatbot guide, which like if we go in here, right, all basically text, screenshots, simple ways to run your application. And then the final website I'll plug is replit.com/templates. And if you head there, that's just a showcase of some popular templates in our library, some AI templates, etc. And I'm logged in, so this is what the Replit logged in interface looks like. But anytime you search for a template in the search bar, it'll return some popular templates, both from our community, but that others have built as well. So there are a ton of things that you can start from. You don't have to start from scratch. And then we also have guides to help you get started. The really great thing about the Replit environment, and something that I've been playing with as well, I'll actually walk through the create REPL flow. So when you create a REPL, you usually start from a template. I often find myself using Python, a blank template, or Node. But you can think about these as just different levels of like packages installed and pre-configured. So if I start with a Python template and I call it like Matt's new app or something, this is sort of where Replit spins up that environment. It's going to like configure Poetry. It's going to install Python, and you'll notice this is a lot faster than a Docker container, right? And the additional problem that AI kind of solves is the cold start problem. So if you're really just trying to get started and you want to just like create a personal assistant chatbot, you could ask our AI to do that, and it's going to use I showed you the models earlier. Some like GPT, the latest GPT models, essentially, to help you get started with that code. So instead of like going back and forth between ChatGPT or whatever, I can just like insert this into main, click run, and then Poetry is going to install those packages, and then it's going to run this app. So we'll see if this, sometimes it doesn't, AI isn't perfect. So we'd have to figure out what's going wrong. We'd have to figure out what's going wrong here, but that can be really good for getting started when it does work.
Right. For the chat module, the chat with AI, to the right panel there.
Yeah.
Is it complementary, or does it require a separate API key for that?
No, so this is included. I believe there's some limitations if you're on the free, if you're only using the free plan. But once you upgrade to Replit Core, everything's included, so you don't really have to worry about separate API keys.
Right. Awesome. And under the hood, what is it running?
Right now, GPT 4.0 and 4.0 Mini. I'm almost positive we're working on support for additional models, so that should be out soon.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Could you maybe do a walkthrough of the different pricing tier of Replit?
Yeah, so I mean, currently, and this is like kind of in flux right now, but currently there's like two main things to consider. Basically, you have your free tier, so anybody can use Replit for free. If you sign up, log in, you'll be able to write code, play around, create REPLs the way I was just doing. So that's first and foremost. And then for advanced functionality, we offer Replit Core, and that's for just a reasonable amount monthly. And Replit Core is going to unlock things like deployments. It's going to unlock things like creating multiple REPLs, having more powerful development environments. So like here you can see, right, I have, I want to really point out, right, by default, we're using a machine with 4 CPUs and 8 gigs of RAM. If I wanted to, I could bump this up to effectively like an M3 MacBook Pro. So if you're developing on a machine with limited resources, like you change this because it's in the browser. Now I'm developing on a really capable advanced machine. And a lot of these, come with that Replit Core subscription, which is currently priced at $20 a month, though that is subject to change. And then finally, we also have Replit Teams, which is more of like an enterprise-focused plan. So if you're really trying to get into like versioning or onboarding contractors or building things with a team, Replit Teams is great. And you can just reach out to our sales team. You go to replit.com/teams, and you'll get started there.
Awesome. Yeah. So perhaps we could maybe take a step back and look at the like the general thought process of how you created this app. Could you maybe walk us through that?
Oh, absolutely. So I knew that I wanted to create, an app to help with data-specific problems. And I had worked as a data analyst, a data engineer in the past. I've used A/B testing tools similar to what I created before. And, really thinking through what's the most valuable thing for me was kind of where I started. So when I was building this out, I knew that I wanted to be able to manipulate variables easily. Sliders, I think, are really nice tactile kind of visual components for manipulating those variables. And then anything I wanted to change, I wanted it to be reflected in real time. Because I think, as a data analyst or as somebody getting started in data science, you might not understand the relationship between variables when you're thinking about things like sample size or minimum detectable effect or statistical power. It's not always obvious how those things impact each other. And that's why I really love this chart. One of my coworkers built us a similar dashboard maybe like a year or two ago. And it was like, as soon as I saw it, I was like, wow. Now I understand the relationship between these things. I never realized that really like sample size was on an exponentially decaying curve basically against things like minimum detectable effect. And these are all kind of complicated terms. So if you're not familiar with statistics at all, don't really worry about it. What I'm trying to say really is I wanted it to be visual, engaging. And one of my favorite parts about front end applications is that I want it to be responsive. So you can see here, if I drag this slider, it's going to update the point on the curve where that intersection occurs and we get our minimum sample size. And Streamlit allowed me to do all of that, right? And so if you're just starting out, or even if you're not just starting out and you want to explain to your teammates how all these variables, relate, say a PM comes to you and they say, we want to run this test, we want to run it in 2 days, and then we want to have our results. Well, you can say, actually, there's this curve here that represents our sample size versus the minimum effect that we want to be able to detect. And if we want to be able to detect a 10% minimum effect, this is like getting to be a mouthful, but if we want to have this minimum detectable effect of 10%, with a baseline conversion rate of 20%, we actually need to have a sample size of about 7,000 per variant. You can see how that's affected on this curve, and it just really makes it easier to get your whole team on board for understanding, these basic statistical truths. And so when I was thinking about all those things, Streamlit stood out as a really obvious choice for a simple tool that I could build them. And from there, architecting kind of the vision for what I wanted the app to look like was as simple as, I'll flip back over to Replit here. Heading into Replit, and then we can go back to basically the Streamlit app. Defining that structure, wait for this to load a second. And then filling in the blanks, right? So I think a really good place to start when you're programming, I'll collapse some of this so it's not incredibly overwhelming. A really good place to start is just defining functions. Okay, well, I know I want to calculate my sample size. Def calc sample size, and then just type a pass, right? You can do that later. But I know I have these three functions that I want to define. I know I want to define sort of the page layout. So I'll start with the columns that I want to have up top. And then we're going to do a 2-tab layout. I'll start with those tabs. And then from there, it's basically filling in the components. So yeah, I would say I started with the overall vision of what I wanted to build from my experience as a data analyst, and then kind of started drilling down into how do I want the app to look? How do I want to engage with the application? And from there, right, a lot of this stuff can be built with AI. So you always have to check the outputs, right? But calculating a sample size, this function, I'm pretty sure was GPT-4o or Claude or some other model. And is really useful for filling in the blanks if you have a general idea of how you want to build.
Sounds good. Yeah. So perhaps could you share maybe like what is the general timeline for building up this particular app? Was it like a week or?
Yeah, I think that when you're using tools like Streamlit, when you're using deployment frameworks like Replit, and when you're using AI-assisted coding, this was like a couple hours. And I'll say a couple hours to get something that I was happy with, right? And then like a day or two of like ideating, thinking about, how can I make this thing like work better? And then I'll dig in for an hour and like hack on it. But something was working in a couple hours. And then anything on top of that was like optimizing and making things more user-friendly, polishing the UI, et cetera, which is like not necessary, but like if I'm going to go on a live stream and share it with people and give some code to people, that's what I like to do. This is I think the power of the tools that we have today, the frameworks and the tools. Even a couple of years ago, this would have taken me a couple of weeks to build. Right. And now, not only can you build it in a couple hours, you can actually deploy it and share it with people in a couple hours. And that's pretty amazing. And I'm excited to see kind of what the data community and what, not only the data community, right, what anybody can come up with given the availability and ease of coding.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, certainly. I really like how you kind of like connected the theory bridge between, like theoretical statistics and, like the practical utility of it. And then like how you could make it visual and then, adding sprinkling in interactive widgets, and then users could, see it in real time on how one parameter affects the other. And yeah, really love the clean look of the app that you've built. It looks pretty intuitive as well.
Well, thank you. And like I said, this is open source, so I'll be sure to share this out. If you want to like get started with it, you can take the code, do whatever you want to with it. I think another thing just to call out about Replit is that at any time you can download this as a zip. So you're not locked into the platform in any sense. At any time you can add a Git integration. So if you wanted to plug this directly into a GitHub repo, you could do that. And then one other final plug perhaps is that we do have our own version control as well. So if I went to history, I can directly roll back any changes that I've made and see kind of in real time what I was working on. So yeah, just a few other things to call out. Yeah, anybody can get started with this. I'll provide the link. You can fork it in literally one click and start remixing it however you'd like.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, just in case viewers would love to connect with you, how could they do that?
Oh, for sure. So I'm on Twitter, pretty active there. I'll share a link. It's x.com/MattPPal. Again, I'll share a link for that. And then you can find me on LinkedIn as well. LinkedIn, I think the username is Matt-Palmer, but I'll have a link in the description too.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and yeah, thank you so much for sharing your insights and this amazing app.
Awesome. Thank you for the opportunity. It's always a pleasure to work with the Streamlit team.